Welcome to the Tricord Advisors podcast, where we answer life's hard questions to help you make smart decisions with your money. I'm Jeremiah Lee, and this is Randy Barkley. We're both certified financial planners. I'm also a California licensed attorney. Welcome back. We've been talking about the psychology of money and finance and financial investing, and we're going to kind of continue that. We've been talking about freedom. Most recently, that's going left off is saying, as you build your life, you're building into this freedom. And one of the big killers of that is debt. Right. Debt is one of those things that especially, and you're, I think, saying some really good stuff right before the break of as people become more rich, I will use that word rather than wealthy, as their finances increase, they want their lifestyle to increase. They want to do these great things.
They make some really stupid mistakes. They make some really stupid decisions.
Yeah.
Right.
And in the moment, they don't feel they're being stupid. They feel I have this forever amount of income, right, and I want to live a life that matches that. And so in order to do that, I need to mortgage this and buy a new one of these, and I can get credit for that. They start building this up, and it becomes, as your assets get bigger, so in some cases, so does the debt. And that there's no wealth there. There's nothing created, right? It's when your debt and your spending stay low and your income comes up, you're able to actually generate wealth. And an item we talk about in the psychology that we talk with clients is there's a real beauty of being optimistic and hopeful for the future, but also being a little bit paranoid about the things that can bite you. And a big one being things like cryptocurrency. Right. Folks that they were optimistic, they were hopeful, they saw this great future.
Yeah, and again, it always comes back to somebody. People that go into things like that, they feel like they have special knowledge, and it's interesting. I know something you don't know, and I know something that most of the world doesn't know. Yeah, and you know what? You don't. Yeah. The bottom line is you don't.
And I think people initially with just use cryptocurrency or Bitcoin for a while. Felt I understand how this works, or I'm an early adopter. I'm in here. And they shot up, and so there's that hope and optimism that is great. That's kind of the American spirit. That's entrepreneurs. Right. That's all these things that allow us to take these big steps forward. But the risk, I don't think people that I knew that were big into crypto were not paranoid enough about the risk that they were also taking on. And we saw that we saw Bitcoin go way up, we saw it come way down. We've seen a number of these rise like a rocket and then come crashing back down. And that idea, I think, taking that throughout someone's whole life to say, what areas of my life do I need to be paranoid about that can really bite me? And success isn't just, success overnight, but over your life, over time. And there's a great, just to transition a little bit into this idea of time as you're building enough, as you're building financial freedom. It takes time, and it's not something to rush. So Warren Buffett, who everyone knows, he's made $81.5 billion.
And that was a few years ago.
81.5 of his 84.5, with the numbers. So the vast majority of his wealth was made after he was 65. And people have known and talked about Warren Buffett for years and decades, that he's been, famous, and he's been, a known great investor. But 81 billion of his 84 billion was made after he was 65. And just that also means he had 3 billion going into that. He built a huge amount during his life.
But he could have stopped.
He
could have stopped and said, I'm done. Right. And most people, they reach that age of whatever that retirement age is, and then they stop. Well, Warren Buffett was an investor from a child. So as a child, he had this fascination about economics. And then he also was under the tutelage of one of the greatest economic teachers out of Columbia, Graham.
Yeah, Benjamin Graham.
And he went on to have a very, very successful life in investing. But he will tell you, and in fact, all the stats are, his initial investments, he made some really bad investments. He made some bad choices, but he also made some very, very good investors, very good investments. And obviously time was his friend because it compounded.
Yep. But over time, he persisted, and say it, when he had $3 billion, which a lot of people would say is an enormous amount of money, and it is, he could have become very risky and said, well, I got to get to, I want to get to 100 billion. I got to get that now, right? And increase his risk. Or he could have said, I had enough and just stop investing. But I see that the same thing, back the numbers down a little bit, but people, we look at it retiring, that they'll say, hey, I got 4 years till I'm going to retire. I just got to really pump this risk because I want to get to a certain number. I got to get to a certain thing. It's a poor idea. Others, they'll get to, 65, 70, retire and say, okay, I'm done. Put it all in cash. I don't want to, have any more risk. I just want to have, and on both situations, they're either taking way too much risk and they're jeopardizing their future, or they're really taking the engine out that very reasonably and a reasonable risk could produce a great future for them and the next generation. And so it's that idea of persisting
Right.
and persisting in what? The answer is in a plan. I mean, for us, when we look through, we always calculate kind of the required rate of return for a client. What do you need to return on your money? What does your investment need to generate in order to hit all your goals? And once we have that number, we have a guideline, and then we say, what should we target? Do you want to do more than that? We probably shouldn't do less than that. We kind of have that discussion. But with that, it's a real reasonable way to say, what can I take on my life reasonably without going too far up, too far down? What do I really need? And investing for enough, in essence, without taking on.
Yeah, I mean, risk. I had a man told me a long time ago, and I've really adopted this in my thinking, is that, as we counsel people, I really want to know what they want. And if I can get a hold of their wanter, that's the thing that's going to drive them. And it could be in some cases they're too risky. And in other cases, it could be that they're too scared. It's a matter of keeping balance and understanding what the client, and again, going back to reference that you talked about earlier, it's their history, what their parents gave into them, what their personal experience was, whatever happened. That tells you a lot about how they see money at that moment. It also, there's no certainty of future, but we know that if people act in prudent and rational ways, they're going to have more at the end than what they started. And some people just can't get past a certain obstacle. And a lot of times it's emotional, right? Yeah,
it's an emotional obstacle. It's either an ego or it's like we said, I don't deserve this. And people have self-destructive behaviors in the midst of this with their finances. Right. They overspend because they don't feel they deserve it to get themselves back down to where they feel it should be. The other piece I just want to touch on a little bit is as we move forward, there's rational choices that the math would say, an economist would say, here's what you should do. You should max out your 401k every year from year 20 to 30 years old and eat top ramen. And then there's things that are reasonable for people. And I think to separate that a little bit too is
to live your life.
Yeah, as you're living your life, I always tell, especially people in their 30s, that as you're looking at retirement, you need to save, you need to start moving that direction. But there's college education to be paid for, there's vacations to be taken, there's houses to buy. There's a lot of life that's going to happen before retirement. And so it's not an either or, and people usually come with that mindset, either save a retirement or I do this. But it has to be both and to say, what's a reasonable way to move forward the best way that you can, the life you have. And when you have those good moments of luck, man, to take advantage of them. I mean, we've had clients that inherit a chunk from their parents, not a chunk that's going to allow them to stop working and live a different life, but to say, this just moved you forward 10 years in your financial goals. And so let's just plug that in and let's get you going. And that's a great moment.
Yeah. And again, going back to what you want. And I think it's satisfying I always told clients, I said, if you're looking for somebody to build extreme wealth for you, we're probably not your firm. What we want to do is to bring more financial freedom, and freedom is a big, big dividend of having financial security. And we see people where they ruin, not knowing, but they ruin their freedom, and they end up desperate and anxious and making decisions that are not correct for their financial freedom, and they make decisions that just terrorize their overall financial goals. And we've seen it again and again, and it's heartbreaking to see people go through that kind of thing.
Yep. And part of that is, we've had clients that come in the moment, but really to have that relationship to where we know someone, they know us, we've walked through life with them, we know their wants, we know where they're headed. And when those moments come, either good or bad, there's a great sounding board. There's someone to walk them through. I mean, retirement being a moment, right? You can walk them through, here's a way to do this well. It really lines up with where you're headed.
So we've talked about a lot of things here today, and we'd like to hear from you if you'd like to know more about our firm and how we help our clients reach the goals that have the life that they deserve.
If you missed any part of this episode, you can catch us on YouTube, or you can go to our website, retirementunlimited.com.
Until next week, folks, may you grow in wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for listening.